All right, this week in the sports world has just been absolutely bonkers. It's been nuts. I mean, NFL, college football, everything. Within 24 hours, I believe, we saw three of the greatest coaches, NFL and college football coaches of all time, not necessarily all retire. Now, Saban retired officially, and he's going to help out Bama, and it was great news that they've got him in office in Bryant-Denny. You know he's loving that, but I'm sure he's going to be spending a lot of time down my way. For those who don't know, I'm in West Palm. Saban just bought a house in Jupiter with his wife, Miss Terry, so I'm sure they'll be spending a lot more time down here. Of course, people know about the car dealerships and the other businesses that Saban is a part of, but we also had two other greats, not necessarily retire, but say that they are moving on from their specific role with their specific team. Obviously, Pete Carroll. I'm a big Seahawks fan because of Chris Gray, who, those of you who listened to our podcast episode with him, I hope you enjoyed that, and he is the reason why I pulled for the Seahawks, obviously along with the Dolphins. But Pete Carroll may be staying in the building with Seattle, may not. A lot of people, there's speculation he may take another job, and Bill Belichick is probably going to have another coaching job as well. So first of all, before we just dive into college football specific news, it's just been a mind-blowing, insane week for the sports world with all of this news. And I'm going to have a special episode to cover more of Nick Saban and his legacy. Of course, it's personal for me. I'm an Alabama fan. But as just a sports fan in general, and college football fan in general, and football fan in general, you have to admit that this guy, maybe if you won't say he is, you'll say he is one of. And if you don't think he is, I've got a couple arguments for you, but one of, and I would say the greatest football coach of all time. And so we're going to have another episode to talk about that with some other Alabama fans and fanatics and those who watch them closely. But I want to talk about some other things that are going on in the shadows. One of the questions that's kind of moved down a little just because of the nature, not because it's not important, but just because of the nature of the craziness of all that's going on, is what is Jim Harbaugh's next move? All right, I want to give props to Michigan. I was hard on them this year with the cheating and with the craziness, and I honestly hate that all of that happened because, as I've mentioned before, had a great friend play at Michigan, got to go to a game at the Big House when they whooped up on Penn State, when Penn State was very good, when they had a Trace McSorley, a Saquon Barkley type offense, when they were very good, when they had beaten Michigan the year before. I'm talking years ago, 2018, before Michigan was on the stretch where they were beating Ohio State every year and they were making the playoff every year, before they had gotten into that, before the desperate years, the dark years of 2020, when it looked like Jim Harbaugh may not even make it through that year. So I want to give them credit, and that's a testament to like sticking with the guy. I think so often programs and fan bases, they get upset. They don't let a guy have a full tenure. They don't let him stay long enough. And so props to Michigan for sticking with Harbaugh despite all the craziness, and they got rewarded for it. I mean, they just won a national championship, an undefeated season, one of now only 7 teams to actually be 15-0 or have a 15-win season in college football. And a lot of those teams that did it before are from way back. I mean, I'm talking like Ivy League schools like Yale. And so I think now in the future, we all know we're probably going to see more 15-win teams. That's up for debate, though. That's not a guarantee. But I could see a team like Georgia running the table next year, a team like Ohio State running the table next year, winning 15 games, even with a loss or two sprinkled in there. Because you got to think conference championship weekend, and then maybe a bye, maybe not a bye in the playoff, but potentially 4 or 5 playoff games if you don't get that bye, on top of a 12-game regular season schedule. I just think that we're going to see more 15-win teams. But the question is not that. The question is, what is next for Jim Harbaugh? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And I'm going to have some other people as guests on these YouTube videos and on the pod to talk about what they think. The news may pop soon before we get to those episodes. I know that there was a lot of talk about it kind of being down to him or Ben Johnson with the Chargers. I think that's a job that Harbaugh would love. He's a West Coast guy. He obviously had a ton of success in San Francisco with the 49ers and at Stanford. We all know that game where he upset Pete Carroll, speaking of Pete Carroll, when they were 40-point dogs against USC. So obviously Jim Harbaugh, one of the premier coaches in the game and one of the premier coaches presumably available, right? Because I kind of put him out there as available because Michigan is still trying to lock him up and sign him to an extension, and other teams are probably also interviewing him and vying for his services as their next head coach. So that's interesting. And along with that, his quarterback this year, J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy has had an unbelievable college career. Only one loss as the starter at Michigan. So we'll see what his next move is. And an interesting note with that is, like, does he ride off into the sunset? He kind of fulfilled his promise, 2 years in the playoff where they lose in the first round. Him and Blake Corum, a lot of noise, a lot of promises, and they came through this year and they won it all. Does he think they can do that? Does he know what Harbaugh's deal is? Like, he's coming up on the wire here of when he has to make that decision to declare for the NFL draft. And obviously in Mel Kiper Jr.'s latest rankings, he has J.J. McCarthy as the 5th quarterback off the board and the last quarterback taken in the first round. Obviously, we all know this is a really good quarterback class. And that doesn't even include guys like Quinn Ewers, who could be eligible for the draft but decided to stay another year in college. So J.J. McCarthy being ranked 5th is always an interesting spot to be at. And I wonder if Ewers kind of felt like he was in that same boat and decided to stay another year. Obviously, Texas did not win the national championship and did not win the Sugar Bowl either. So, and what Sark is building there is phenomenal. So that's understandable that Quinn Ewers would want to be back. He's also a lot younger than J.J. McCarthy just because he enrolled early. So Ewers is a lot younger versus a lot of these other guys like a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix Jr. who have used a lot of years in college, played a long time, had some extra eligibility or injuries, and those guys are actually older than several starting quarterbacks in the NFL right now, like a CJ Stroud or a Trevor Lawrence. So lots of questions. What do we think is going to happen? What's going on? Random side note in the Big Ten as well. If you're an IU fan, you've got to be excited about Coach Cignetti. He's talking about culture. He's talking about complacency. He's talking about entitlement. He is looking to build something there. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting. IU was on the map a couple years ago. I talked about that 2020 year with Jim Harbaugh and the struggles that Michigan had. And that was the year that IU really took off and had an unbelievable season. Obviously, you connect the dots and you go, okay, Tom Allen, now the defensive coordinator at Penn State, was the head coach. Michael Penix Jr., now finishing up national title runner-up, going in the draft, likely a first-round selection, ends up at Washington, now off to a NFL future. And then Kalen DeBoer, who was the offensive coordinator that year for IU, now the head coach at Alabama. We're going to have Howie on to talk about this because Howie's been a huge DeBoer guy, followed him all the way. And man, I just want to say the rise that this guy has had is bonkers. I mean, a South Dakota guy through and through, high school football there, Sioux Falls, NAIA program, plays there, coaches there, and from there, just a crazy journey. Eastern Michigan, Fresno State, IU, Washington. He's won. He's won everywhere he's went. And a lot of people are talking about Brian Harsin. Auburn fans, they want to try to get in Alabama fans' heads. And rightfully so. And they're like, Brian Harsin, Northwest guy, Boise State, he was a disaster. Didn't understand the culture. Wasn't a good fit at Auburn. Well, I think there's two differences between Brian Harsin and Kalen DeBoer. And these are not just small differences. These are major differences. Number one, Kalen DeBoer is a winner. He's got more of a proven track record. I understand that Harsin had a brief and decent, above average run, I would say. DeBoer has been excellent. He's been a winner all the way through. And he's had less talent, and he's done more with less talent. Number two, Harsin was stubborn. Let's be honest. He didn't change. He didn't make adaptations. In the world of college football today, if you're not willing to adapt, ask Dabo Swinney, right? You're kind of finally seeing him turn the corner on some of these changes now. If he would have adapted better, maybe he would be the Alabama coach right now. Because we all know he wanted that job. The incredible story of him being a walk-on there, his mom moving to Tuscaloosa, living with his mom, and him being there. We all probably know that if Swinney was given the opportunity for this job, probably would have taken it. Dream job for him. But the last few years, he hasn't adapted to the modern landscape of college football. Kalen DeBoer has adapted, and he has won at every level in different contexts, NAIA, NCAA, transfer portal, no transfer portal, all of the above. The guy has been a winner. So If you can't catch my drift, I am very excited about the hire. But Kalen DeBoer, the next coach at Alabama. Boy, oh boy, another Big Ten team with crazy news right now. Ohio State. And as we speak, I am nervous as all be because of the rumors of Caleb Downs, following guys on social media. Obviously, they finished second in his recruiting. I just want to say this. Obviously, Isaiah Bond has already hit the portal. The portal, it's got a lot of pluses, it's got a lot of minuses. And you have to try your best to stay in the middle on these things to see them reasonably. And you have to admit, there are strengths to it and there are weaknesses to it. One of the weaknesses that's a real bummer, and this hit me hard when Isaiah Bond hit the portal, is that we used to have guys that would be in a program for 3, 4, 5 years, and you fall in love with them, you cheer them on, you watch their journey, their trajectory, their path as they grow and build, and they maybe redshirt a year, they sit behind guys a couple years, and then they get these moments that go down in history. Isaiah Bond, 4th and 31, the gravedigger. He was a part of that. One of the greatest moments, if not, I know the kick six and, there's absolute madness in the Iron Bowl history. Crazy plays. Cam Newton's comeback years ago. That play is one of the best plays in Alabama football history. It's one of the best plays in Iron Bowl history. And, he has cemented himself as a major piece in that rivalry. That's going to be one of the clips that's played in the hype video every single year. When ESPN rolls it out, when Alabama social media rolls it out, when you're in the stadium getting ready for the game, that will be one of the plays. And now, just a month and a half later, he's in the portal. That stinks. It really does. And if that was a player on your team and you had that incredible moment with the guy, and then he hits the portal a month and a half later, can you bear with me for a second here? Dude, that stings. That's a bummer. That's one of the fallouts. That's one of the failures. That's one of the challenges of the modern college football landscape, of what's going on with the transfer portal. And you have to think, he would actually probably have more opportunities next year to excel as a wide receiver with the offenses and the offensive mind and the game plan that Kalen DeBoer carries with him. Let's be honest. Nick Saban, yes, he had years where he had Sark as his OC. He had years where he had Lane Kiffin as his OC. He had years where Mac Jones lit it up, and Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle, and Jerry Jeudy, and Amari Cooper. He had incredible wide receivers, but let's be honest, Nick Saban has always been a defensive guy. And he's been a run-heavy guy, and he's adapted. And he had guys like Tua Tagovailoa come in, and Mac Jones and Bryce Young, where they were much more pass-heavy. But obviously this year with Jalen Milroe and the quarterback play that they had and the offensive line play that they had, they ran the ball a lot more, and the passing game was very inconsistent. And that probably was the reason they lost to Michigan. Give Michigan all the credit in the world. Their D-line caused problems. Their D-line dominated that game, and their DBs were very sticky. So I can understand why Isaiah Bond's experience has maybe been frustrating for him on an individual level. But, dude, you got to think with Kalen DeBoer coming in, bro, you could be the wide receiver 1 next year, and you could ball out. And look at Washington's receivers right now. Romeo Dunze, probably a top 5 pick in the draft. And he wouldn't even probably be the first wide receiver off the board. He could be the second receiver off the board and still be a top 5 pick. Probably top 10 at the lowest. But it's Marvin Harrison Jr. and Romeo Dunze and then everybody else. Dude, that's bonkers to me. And that's one of the challenges of, modern society and college football where it's at. It's the grass is always greener elsewhere, and I'm going to move on, and I'm going to find something better here. And with all that being said, I want to give credit to Dan Lanning. I think that Dan Lanning was my number 1 choice. I presumed he would be the next Alabama head coach. And I thought with his experience with Saban and Kirby and in the SEC that he would want the job. And you know what? I say this as an Alabama fan. I give him all the credit in the world for staying with Oregon. Dude's a human being, too. We forget that. He'd have to move his family back across the country. He's got a wife and kids. He says that they love it out there in Eugene. He's got an awesome deal out there as Oregon's head coach. A fan base that's not entitled. I think Colin Cowherd kind of put Alabama and Ohio State in the same category. And it's hard for me to disagree. We're entitled fan bases. Those are entitled fan bases that expect championships, that expect results. Ryan Day has been a phenomenal, I would say, top 5 coach the past 5 years. And they're ready to move on from the guy because he hasn't won a national championship. He hasn't beaten Michigan every year. He hasn't won the Big Ten every year. He hasn't been in the playoff. Like, dude has been phenomenal. Be careful what you wish for. And obviously, at some point, yes, it's hard to lose to your rival 3 years in a row. But think about this. Ryan Day's kicker, Ohio State's kicker, last season, okay, 2022-2023 year, okay? They were a field goal attempt away, as it was ringing in New Year's, from beating Georgia and going to the national championship. And do you think TCU would have given them problems? Like, Ohio State almost beat Georgia, and Georgia beat TCU by 50-something. I mean, goodness gracious, dude. Like, take a step back and realize if that kick goes through, you were national champs last year. You still have to play the game. It's not a guarantee you beat TCU. But you were a kick away from that. And Georgia has only lost to one team the last 3 years. Alabama. They won 2 years in a row. This year, they lose to Alabama in the SEC championship. And I would have loved to see Georgia versus Michigan. I think it would have been a great football game. So sometimes it's just take a deep breath, take a step back, a little bit of perspective. You can't win the national championship every single year. Now, if you're an Alabama fan like myself, you were spoiled with Nick Saban. It's going to be different. It's going to be a new era. But I am excited about Kalen DeBoer. And last thing I'll say here, FSU, I'm going to dig into that more to see the probation. It's interesting that, like, they get the 2-year ban, they have allegations, and in the midst of that, somehow, some way, Mike Norvell still gets leverage to get an extension. 10 years, $80 million, or 8 years, $80 million, $10 million a year. Shout out to Jimmy Sexton. Guy must be the agent for every major college football coach right now, and he was wheeling and dealing and got his guys some extensions and some guaranteed money and some buyout money. So Jimmy Sexton doing it all. College football. Ohio State loading up in the portal right now. I got off on a trail about Caleb Downs, but I'm nervous about Caleb Downs going there. Absolutely. Obviously, Travion Henderson says he's coming back, and Quinshaw Judkins is going there. So you have a 1A and a 1B in that. Like, Judkins has been ridiculous in the SEC, leading the SEC in rushing last year. It's like stupid. Great receiving back. Travion Henderson coming back. Will Howard in as your quarterback. I know you got McLaughlin from Alabama. Hopefully he can figure out the snapping issues for you. Or maybe he moves to guard. And, like, he's a great offensive lineman. So they are loading up in the portal right now. They're crushing it. All signs tend to look really good for Ohio State being a very dangerous team next year. I think that your early 1 and 2 rankings have to be Georgia and Ohio State just for who they're bringing back, who they're bringing in, the culture that they built. They're hungry, obviously upset about how this year went. So my way too early, just top 2 is definitely Georgia and Ohio State. But we're just getting rolling in the offseason, people. We got a lot more videos coming. We got a lot more episodes coming. Make sure that you like and subscribe to our channel. We're trying to give you some of the best, unbiased college football content that we can. Next time you should see Howie with me. But again, thanks for tuning into the LCFP. Laner is out.